start recording again. And let's move on to the next bit. So at this point, you should have a very good understanding of the trade flows and what they mean in terms of attractiveness of countries. You should have understood what the market access conditions and trade regimes are, and therefore you should be able to select one market. So we've done the screening, we've understood which are the markets, and we've selected one target market. Okay? So the where to play, done, finished. We've understood where to play. Now let's move on to the less obvious part of the research process, which is understanding how to win. And the reason why I'm saying it's less obvious is because there is unfortunately not a one tool fixes everything approach. We do not have the equivalent to a trade map or to a market access map for this component. Let me explain why. Let me get into this. So to understand the market, we need to consider what are the characteristics of that target market. In other words, we need to think of the target market as another domestic market. And what that means is we need to understand whether the product goes, for example, on a B2B. Is this, for example, I don't know, an auto component or a, I don't know, cement or steel rods or aluminium planks or car engines. These are products that are not sold to consumers directly. They can, but that is incredibly marginal. The bulk, the core of the market is a business-to-business market. Most industrial products are sold business to business. They do not get to consumers but after a long process. But when it comes to agricultural products or apparel, they tend to be closer to being business to consumer. So that will change everything about the way we approach the market. Because it will change the answers to the questions of who buys this product, where do they buy it from, but why do they buy it? What type of need, what type of necessity is this product addressing? What are the major consumption and production trends for this product in that specific market? How do people use this product? Are there different consumer segments? If we're discussing, for example, the B2C, are there different segments for the product? Within these segments, are there ones that are particularly interesting for us? What are the requirements? What are the ranges of prices? These are the types of questions that will guide our research, our thinking in the next phase of the research process. And of course, there is no single solution. There is no single source of information that will provide answers to all of these things. That doesn't exist. There are a number of sources, and so this section is about understanding different types of sources of information. So the first, what is to me my preferred, my go-to source of information on markets, particularly the EU markets, is CBI. The CBI market analysis, market intelligence team works extensively trying to identify trends in the market. So they have completely free of charge information on all of the sectors. So Afka showed you yesterday a slide full of sectors. All of those sectors, including some services, have very, very, very good information regarding opportunities, threats, market access conditions, trends, what is happening in each of those markets, how do you get in them, how do you get inside those markets, how do you enter those markets. There's a lot of information. So again, CBI is my preferred source of information for EU markets. CBI publishes the type of information that commercial companies will sell for many thousands of euros or dollars. So it is excellent. I am very familiar with some of their research around coffee and cocoa and fresh fruits and vegetables and some spices. And I have to say that it really is top-notch quality. It is information obtained by expert consultants that go and ask the right sources. They go and ask importers, they go and ask wholesalers, they do the primary research, and they collect all of that into fairly small reports. I mean, this one is saying that it takes about 23 minutes to read. So relatively condensed, relatively brief, but all full of substance. So CBI, top source when it comes to the EU, my go-to source when it comes to the EU. But beyond this, what this type of information will help you do is it will help you define and understand segments. Segmenting is incredibly important because segmenting is what allows to take that whole mass of market, of people in a market, and breaking it down into groups of people that share characteristics, and that share characteristics that make them attractive, valuable, important for us as sellers of products. Of course, pretty much none of your companies, of the companies you're supporting and advising, is going to sell directly to consumers anywhere in export markets. 95, 98% of their sales will be done through an importer or a retailer or an intermediary in the target market. So they will not be in contact directly with consumers, but they do need to understand what is happening at the consumer front, what type of niches, what type of segments, what are the trends in the consumer market so that they can adapt their own products. They may even identify new segments so that they go and find one buyer for that segment and another buyer for that other segment. Right? So from a strategic standpoint, from the definition of how do you define how to win in this market, it is incredibly important that companies understand what are the segments and what are the different groups in the market based on their characteristics. So how do you define these segments? Well, there's three types of criteria. There's the simple geographic criteria, whether it's a city, the country, the province, the region, the neighborhood, etc. And you can make this as large or as small as you want. Typically, geographic segmentation takes importance or makes sense when you're thinking about logistics, about distribution, about taking the product to consumers or to distribution centers so that consumers can access it. So that is very, geography is very important for distribution and logistics purposes, but also geography can be determinant because geography is, for example, the difference between urban consumers and rural consumers. And of course, you're all in Baku and you understand that while being in Baku, although you may come from different places far in the countryside, as a consumer in Baku, we have a set of behaviors that are determined by the fact that you are in a city. Whereas if you're in the countryside, well, behaviors will be different because you don't have as many services, or retail points are not as close by, or your communication may be sketchier, or numbers of reasons. So geography matters, and geography is a criterion to bear in mind, but it is relatively limited in its capacity to determine what are the shared characteristics of the group of people you're looking at, of the segment. Then there is a second criterion, demographic. So this is where we look at populations and their characteristics: age, gender, Generation X, Generation Y, Generation Z, millennials, all these things, race, culture, um, stage in life. Are these, for example, are we talking about baby boomers that have or are mostly retiring, late 60s and onwards, mid to late 60s and onwards and older? Or are we talking about the millennials, or the, like my daughter, Gen Zers, Generation Z? All of these things, all of these criteria, all of these forms of breaking down the population into groups based on their demographics tends to generalize preferences or behaviors based on age, based on gender, based on income, based on race and ethnicity. So, for example, if we're discussing the segment of Muslim consumers for food purposes, then of course we'll be discussing the importance of halal certification, right? And when you have a product that is halal, of course you want to have demographic segmentation based on ethnicity and or religion. And typically ethnicity and religion are, typically very, very tightly blended or knit. Some other things are important in terms of culture. For example, the demographics of culture tend to relate to, for example, how religious, or how, for example, how tightly knit is the Azeri diaspora in the UK, for example. So you can try and sell to the Azeri diaspora, I don't know what type of product, or typical traditional ingredients, or typical prepared foodstuffs, or whatever it is. Then there is a third way of segmenting, of breaking down large groups into smaller groups, and these are called psychographic. And these are behavioral traits that come out of values and lifestyle. So, for example, in Europe nowadays, the responsible consumption trend is so strong that you do need to bear in mind that there is a segment of people, I am a part of that, that will only buy fruits and vegetables and food products that are organic certified, or will at least try and only buy organic certified, because we believe in the value of preserving nature and of respecting diversity and not using synthetic chemicals and all these things. It's a set of beliefs and values, etc. There will be other people that you can group together. For example, the athletes. I don't know how much of a boom it is in Azerbaijan, this exercise craze, but in most of the Western world, Western, quote unquote, many times, inverted commas, this running and working out craze has become just madness. So the number of friends I have that are registering for marathons and practicing to compete in triathlons and all these things is just ridiculous. There's plenty of them. Um, so in terms of lifestyles, these are the sporty lifestyles, and they will be looking for the specific types of foods, but they will also be looking for specific types of holidays and leisure activities, and they'll be looking for specific types of apparel. And so they have traits because of their lifestyles, because of the things that bring them pleasure, because of the things they group around for leisure activities. They become a segment. And in this same approach, you can generate many different segments. So it is important that you understand that these three criteria are not exclusive. You do not only have to look at city or neighborhood or province or age. You can have combinations of all criteria, and these combinations or these criteria will help you make smaller groups. And why is that important? Because in marketing, the more you manage to have very defined characteristics of your buyer, of your client, of your customer, of your consumer, the more you're capable of understanding what drives their consumption, what drives their purchasing habits, what drives their behavior. And as such, the more you understand why they do the things they do, the more you can adapt your product size, your product specification, your distribution channel, your prices, your packaging, your product grouping, everything around your offer to serve those interests. So segmentation is incredibly important. Now, again, 95, 98, perhaps 100% of your companies will not be selling to consumers directly. So they will not be in a position to directly define what niche within the target market they are going to address and how they're going to address it with all full control. They will need to address it by looking at the right or looking for the right intermediary to get to that segment. But again, understanding segments is incredibly important, particularly because the closer you get to selling to consumers, the more you are going to be involved in the process of promoting those products to consumers. We'll get to that in the next set, but just I want to, in the next presentation, that's going to be tomorrow. But I just want to make sure that you understand the importance of understanding segments. Okay? Again, most of your clients, of your companies, will be selling to another company. They will not be selling to consumers. But increasingly, for example, your apparel exporters will be trying to sell directly to consumers on eBay, on Amazon, on whatever type of electronic platform. Of course, e-commerce brings its own set of complexities and difficulties and challenges, and it's a fairly different set of problems. But when they approach consumers through e-commerce channels, they need to bear in mind what consumers' habits are, and therefore all this discussion around segmentation, all this discussion around consumer habits, around lifestyles and values and age and location, all these becomes increasingly relevant and even more determinant to their success. Okay, so I guess the key message here is your clients need to be incredibly aware, incredibly familiar with the things that drive segmentation, and you as support for these companies, you also need to be in a position to understand these things so you can explain them. Okay? So this is moving beyond purely trade flow data. This is moving way beyond trade map and market access map. This is trying to understand what makes consumers and buyers tick. Because, as I was saying, the more precisely a segment can be defined, the more you can build your differentiation, the more you can make your product be unique. So yesterday we were discussing how much Kia has differentiated by offering 5-year guarantees as opposed to every other car manufacturer that only offers 3. And they do that because they are targeting the segment of buyers, of clients of cars who are interested in guarantees. So these are the buyers that are willing to pay, that are interested in buying as much quality as they possibly can for as low price as they possibly can, and getting and buying a car that will not require any further investment for as long as possible. So in that sense, offering the additional 2 years is giving the consumer the ability to not spend money on car repairs for 2 additional years. For a lot of buyers, that is very good. That's not the criterion that drives Mercedes buyers. That's why Mercedes-Benz, they couldn't care less. They couldn't give less of a hoot about guarantees, because buyers, the majority of the buyers of Mercedes cars, they don't really have a problem with money. So not having to pay for repairs is, yeah, okay. Maybe a buyer of Mercedes or even higher luxury cars, Bentleys, for example, doesn't really care if the car costs a fortune to repair. Probably what they care about is making sure that they have a car that is up to their standards if the Bentley or the Mercedes breaks down for whatever reason. So what I'm saying is understanding what drives the consumer, what drives the purchases, will help you differentiate by building the right attributes, be them tangible attributes or be them augmented attributes. So I keep on referring to those 3 concentric ovals that I presented yesterday. Okay? Ways of building differentiation, and just a simple example, olive oil. Olive oil can be segmented in so many ways. So when somebody says, I produce olive oil, they're not saying anything. They're saying, from a production standpoint, I grow olive trees and I collect the olives that they produce. That's all they're saying. But they're not even necessarily understanding how they're going to make sure that those olives yield the most revenue they can for them. So, for example, that means that they don't really understand that there are segments within olive oil. There are people that will buy extra virgin olive oil, fresh or cold pressed, first press extra virgin olive oil. And then there are people that will buy just hot pressed, third press olive oil. They couldn't care less about that, because the people who are very very much aware of the health benefits of olive oil will want the purest, most natural olive oil, because that is the one that has conserved as many of the minerals and nutrients as possible, whereas third warm press could be using olive oil for skincare or for soaps. or for some other purpose. So yeah, I couldn't care less. That's not as important. Therefore, as an olive oil producer, you do have an interest in extracting that first press, cold press, very exclusive olive oil, and keeping it separate from the one that you're going to take from after having to warm up the remainders of the olives and press them for the third time, and whatever comes out, you sell those to the soap manufacturers. And therefore, you have different segments for the same product, right? Then we're looking at product use and product like production process. And it's the same thing that can happen, for example, for tomatoes. If you're looking at tomatoes, well, of course, the best quality, the reddest, sweetest, juiciest, etc., those you sell fresh. The ones that are not perfect, not fantastic, not beautiful, those maybe you want to keep and crush into puree and sell the puree. Or maybe you don't even do anything, you just push them all together and sell that for somebody who's going to press them and push them into puree and make tomato paste or tomato concentrate. There are different segments for different qualities, different production processes, and therefore, to maximize revenue, producers and sellers need to understand what are all the possibilities around their products. Because to build differentiation and to maximize the revenue, to increase as much as possible the price for the product sold, you need to cater to the different needs. And for example, olive oil connoisseurs, I'm not one, I'm not an expert in olive oil. I don't know if any of you are experts in olive oil, but they do recognize whether an olive oil is Algerian or Tunisian or Italian or Spanish. Sorry, I don't have that palate. I'm not so much of an expert, but there are people that will buy olive oil based on where it comes from because they do recognize the difference, right? So again, that's another mechanism or another way in which you can build differentiation. So again, what I'm trying to say is differentiation is built when you understand in a lot of detail what are the drivers of the purchases of the clients. Where do you get all of this information? Well, there are good news and there are some less good news. The good news is that there are loads of institutional sites, such as CBI, that provide you with a lot of information. It's not exactly true, but almost most of the developed countries have a body that does market research that they offer for free. So the European Union does it through CBI, and they also have the EU Trade Help Desk. The Canadians do have a TFOC, the Trade Facilitation Office Canada, TFOC. They provide also lots of information. The Japanese do it through JETRO, the External Trade Organization. ITC has developed the Euromed Trade Help Desk, providing information around European Mediterranean basin area. There is, I am happy to report, starting January next year, so in a month, there will be an Eastern Partnership Trade Help Desk portal launched, managed, developed, and run by ITC as a part of this project. So it will be published, it will be available. It's not available yet, but it should be within a month, say 2 months, very soon. Of course, there's ITC's website, intrasend.org. There is SIPO.ch. This is the Swiss Import Promotion Program, and the IPD, which is the Import Promotion Desk from the Germans. The German government funds this program. Beyond these sites, there is the International Chamber of Commerce. The International Chamber of Commerce is really useful because it is the organization that determines the Incoterms. I will discuss Incoterms soon, not right now, but they offer information on Incoterms, on commercial dispute resolution mechanisms, on many of these things. So they will provide you with detailed information on buyer trends and consumer habits and all these. That's not their thing. But everything that relates to the way commercial transactions are managed and etc., they do offer quite a bit of information. So all of these sites offer lots of information for free. And then there are specialized private information providers. Here I have included a selection, and it's a selection based on the ones I know and use, not that these are the best or not. So for example, a company I like very, very, very much is Euromonitor. Euromonitor is really, really good at doing very detailed consumer analysis and market analysis. They do lots of primary research. They do a lot of surveying, a lot of interviews, a lot of contacting people and buyers and getting lots of information. So they are very good. And at the same level of quality and more or less with the same type of coverage, Compass is also really, really, really good. Factiva is similar, but this is more about news and stuff that is happening. So it's more about, it comes from Dow Jones, so it's more about what has been published, all the news that have been published, and they do really, really good information on that. Business Insider will give you a lot of information about what is the innovation and trends and what is happening with companies. Where are the markets going because of the innovation that companies bring into the market on products and processes and stuff like that. Whereas Dun & Bradstreet, they are experts at doing commercial risk analysis and all things that relate to companies. So if you want to understand which are the buyers which are the buyers in anywhere, in Peru, of any product, Dun & Bradstreet will not only give you their names, email addresses, physical addresses, phone numbers, name of the owner or name of the senior management, but will also give you information about their financials and how trustworthy they are in terms of paying their dues. So whether you should consider giving them credit or not. LexisNexis is really, really, really good at exploring legislation, regulation, and changes to regulation, and therefore helping you measure risk. Ipsos is excellent at doing surveying, so they do very much primary research. They're very, very good at that. Oxford Analytica is more in the analytics of data and trends. So they're more on the economics, which is the same type of thing that the Economist Intelligence Unit does. The Economist Intelligence Unit does a lot of analysis on countries' politics, economics, financial performance, trade performance, and that type of thing. So all of these providers, and these are again just a very, very small sample of everybody that's out there. There's a hell of a lot of providers of information and analysis out there. Just incredible numbers. Most of them tend to be very good. Again, I have included here just a sample, a small sample of the ones I know. But yeah, this is not exhaustive by any means. And this is not even the best or worst. I have no clue who are the best or worst. I just know these are ones that I have used and I find good. Okay? What I'm trying to say is there are lots of experts out there producing lots of information. The characteristic all of these guys share is they sell information. That's how they make their money. That's how they make a living. All of them will charge you for either reports or for subscriptions to access reports, or some of them will sell you just one table or one chapter of one report. It varies, and that changes all the time because there is a very active market for information and analysis. So it is up to you to go and explore what you can find. Having said this, because both of you, there's basically two business support organizations in the room, right? There's the SME organization, and then there's AskPromo. I don't know what budgets you have available for buying access to these things or to these information providers, but definitely is a good thing to have a license, at least one, to some of these places, to at least one of these places, because they will give you very, very valuable information. When it comes to publishing the reports, there are, of course, considerations. So I know, for example, that Euromonitor will not let you publish their reports. What they will do is they will allow you to publish your analysis of their analysis, and it will allow you to publish bits and pieces of their reports if you give them the credit and you warn them beforehand that you'll be doing it. So in the license fee that they'll charge, they'll do that. I am assuming it's the same type of practice all around, but again, I'm not an expert in the field. Okay, so these are sources of information about, or that will help you understand what is happening in the market, what is happening with consumers, what is happening with companies, with innovations, what is happening with the financials, what is happening in the different dimensions of the market. Now let's look at market requirements and understand that these are two broad types of market requirements. There's like two broad families of market requirements. On the one hand, there are the legal requirements. So these are things that have been established by governments, national, provincial, local, whatever. But these are legal requirements for products to access a specific market, geography, and they can relate to a hell of a lot of different areas. Typically, they're related to the health and safety and welfare of consumers. So these are the things, for example, that establish pesticide residue in raw food. This is the type of requirement that mandates the HACCP HACCP certification of processed food. This is the requirement that establishes, for example, the absence of lead in paints, in toys, and in general in paints, right? These are the things that relate to typically known as SPS, the sanitary and phytosanitary space, or the technical rules and obstacles to trade space. This is legally mandated. The fact that it's legally mandated makes it relatively transparent. It's relatively available, easily available, and it has the advantage of being exactly the same for all players that enter the market. So whether national or foreign suppliers of, for example, electric and electronic products, they all have to conform to voltage and isolation and plug shapes and all these requirements, okay? Legal requirements. Then there are market-based requirements. These are market standards, typically known as voluntary standards, right? And they're voluntary because you can decide to follow them or not, as opposed to the legal, which are mandated, they are obligatory. Well, these are voluntary. Now, of course, they are voluntary only in as much as you decide to sell to the client that requires this requirement or not sell to them. These requirements, these typically standards, can be developed by private organizations, but most of the time they're developed by, private but non-profit organizations. Your World Wildlife Fund, your Fair and Wild Foundation, your Rainforest Alliance, your what is it? CCC? What, I can't remember what it's called anymore. The coffee, whatever. I mean, there's hundreds of these organizations that create standards, and these standards are created to promote respect or to promote credibility of a certain number of attributes of the production process, be it the social dimension, the environmental dimension, the economic sustainability dimension, whatever dimension of the production and distribution process of these products. All of them are verified by private organizations. These are not verified by your country authority. So if you sell organic products to Germany, the customs office in Germany is not going to verify whether you have a complying organic standard certification. They couldn't care less. Their problem is the SPS, the sanitary and phytosanitary certification. But your buyer in Germany, he is going to, or she is going to look at your organic certificate and see whether it's compliant with the German laws or not, whether it's up to the standard that they have in place or not, etc. Right? So these are private verification, and because they're private, they're not necessarily as transparent as public sector requirements, just because, again, information may not be available because it's a private arrangement. Now, let's take a look at the legal requirements. Legal requirements, again, are laws. So, for example, this is a page pulled out of European requirements, and they talk about quarantine requirements for bee and bee products and honey, and they're talking about testing requirements and inspection and how the pathological tests are going to be put in place, etc. So these are legal requirements. Everybody has to conform to these, foreign or local. And for example, labeling and packaging, these are requirements, and these tend to be problematic. So labeling, for example, all of these are European standards. Sorry, not standards, requirements. So in European markets, all olive oils must be labeled in accordance to the general labeling requirements of Directive 2013/C, whatever, and all these categories, and they explain exactly how the nutrition facts need to be explained, what are the categories, what is the size of the sign, where it's going to be, etc. All of these things. And as you can see from the packaging text in there, the type of packaging is also legally determined. So, for example, in the case of oils, they have to be marketed in up to 5-liter containers, so you won't find consumer-facing packaging of 10 liters of olive oil. Simply not going to happen. It's illegal to do that. You can sell 10-liter bottles of olive oil, but only to restaurants or to canteens or to hotels, not to consumers. And the containers, they have to have a sealing mechanism like this one in the picture that demonstrates that it's been open, so people cannot go and play around, do fiddly things with the content. Right? Again, legal requirements around packaging and labeling, these are mandatory, these are very important. Then private standards. Private standards are relating to a huge number of concerns. So on the right hand, when we are discussing management systems, they tend to refer to the way the company that produces the things operates. So ISO 9000 refers to quality management. It doesn't refer to the quality of the products, it refers to the management system of the company and how it ensures it consistently delivers the value or the level of service or the level of quality that it's promised. So, if you pardon my French, a company can promise to deliver rubbish, and if they deliver rubbish consistently and with processes and mechanisms to ensure that if there is rubbish that is more rubbish, then they will identify it and act upon it. Right? So that's ISO 9000, and there's literally hundreds of these ISO standards for all types of things, and they're constantly being developed. So energy management, occupational health and hazard, risk management, and food security, and all types of issues are certified by these standards. But these are not product standards. These are management system. There are product standards, such as these ASC, for example, the Aquaculture Stewardship Council, or your Forestry Stewardship Council, or the fishery MSC seal or UTZ, or all of these labels, all of these private standards are referred to the product itself. So what gets certified is the product, but the product is certified on the basis of a production system that is compliant with the standard, right? Both these types of standards will require third-party audit. So a third party, an audit company, SGS, Bureau Veritas, or whatever it is, one of the many, many auditing companies that exist out there, needs to come verify that practice actually follows standard, that what is said in the text actually it meets the practice, and all of that is consistent with the requirements of the standard. And all these things happen, and then you get the blessing from the certifying company. So that means there's audits, that means that there is inspections, that means that there is quite a bit of investment in the setting up of the system and in the maintenance of the system, in ensuring that the system is sustained, that you can keep the certification. Okay? As I said, there are a very large number of private standards. ITC has developed the sustainability map, and within sustainability map, it has created this standards map tool. Standards map is a tool that accesses a database that has 311 of these private standards. That is a lot of them. And you can, as you can see on the menu here, you can access the information contained in there either by only identifying the standards, by comparing the standards, by even using a self-assessment test. to see how you compare what is your situation vis-a-vis the content of a standard. You can identify which is the standard that fits more what you do and what your client needs. So it's really helpful to establish how you're going to certify your production process or your management system, but in this case, it's production process, to make sure that it delivers the certainty that your client wants to have, right? Because all of these standards were created to respond to specific concerns. So elimination of child labor, elimination of slave labor, elimination of synthetic chemical residues because of use of pesticides and fungicides and synthetic fertilizers and all these things, or for example, the elimination of fishing practices that destroy coral reefs. There's a lot of these concerns, and it's from these concerns that private standards stem. But because there are more than one standard per each of these concerns, there tends to be a situation where there's overlaps, and one certification will cover several things. So it is important to examine the different standards to understand how much of the overlap is covered and how you can access one standard and get the most coverage, right? To think strategically about standards. But these are only voluntary certifications for products. The certifications that we were discussing around standards, around production systems, that information you get from ISO. ISO is the International Standardization Organization. There you go, ISO.org, and they provide all of this information. Of course, or a problem is they do not provide this information free of charge. They provide this information at a price, and they are this special organization that is that has members that are the national certifying bodies in each country. So I don't know what the Quality Institute or equivalent is in Azerbaijan, but those are the guys who are members of ISO. So if you want to get ISO information, probably the best source is your National Quality Institute. And there are many, many, many different types of standards, as I mentioned. They have 24,000, more than 24,000 different standards, which include how do you calibrate lab equipment, all the way to how do you record and store information from meetings of the board of directors of a company. Everything. And when you start discussing these standards and these requirements, particularly when you start discussing the technical barriers to trade, the TBT and the SPS, you quickly get into the discussion of NTMs. What are NTMs? I'm pretty sure that most of you are familiar with this expression, but let me just ensure that we are all on the same page. NTMs are non-tariff measures. What is a non-tariff measure? It is a legal measure put in place by a country to achieve policy objectives that it considers important. So, for example, the HACCP, the Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Points method and certification, because it's useful for processing of processed foods, and it's useful so that authorities can know that the processing is done in a manner that is healthy and that ensures that the products are healthy and will not transmit disease, right? Or, for example, rules around pasteurization of milk or whatever. All of these measures, all of these decisions that are put in place by a government to either look after the health and safety of consumers or to organize the customs procedures or to organize the payment of taxes, including customs and tariffs. All of these procedures, they are non-tariff measures. Why? Because they're measures that don't affect tariffs directly. But when they become difficult to comply with, they become NTBs, non-tariff barriers. And they can become barriers if they are difficult to comply with. So, for example, I'm just making stuff up here on the spot, right? So this is not true, but just an example. If you have to pay your tariffs, but only can pay them in cash at the bank tellers, at the till of the bank, and can only pay them from 3 to 5 p.m. on Tuesdays, well, that becomes a barrier. Because if you are exporting into a country and the country has this requirement, if you're not there on a Tuesday at 3 p.m., well, there's probably a long queue of people queuing up to pay in cash the tariffs, and it becomes really difficult, and therefore it becomes a barrier. Why am I describing all of this? Because NTMs, non-tariff measures and non-tariff barriers, have become, since even before the pandemic, since probably the 2008 financial crisis, they have become increasingly pervasive, increasingly present in the international market, in the international trade flows. They are more and more present because countries put in place these measures as a backdoor into getting protection for their domestic industries. Or it can be that they put in place these measures and do not really realize that they are putting in place obstacles to trade. So ITC, as a part of a group that includes UNCTAD and the World Bank and other people, have been, for more than 10 years now, conducting what they call NTM business surveys. So literally they go and survey 10,000 companies in a country and ask them what are their problems when they operate. And out of that come these identifications of what are non-tariff measures and what are the obstacles. In the domestic front, in the internationalization, in the export or import direction, all across the economy, where are the obstacles? Pop quiz. Where do you think most responses identify NTMs to be concentrated? In other words, out of all the surveys, and they have done these surveys in, I don't know, more than 50 countries now. Of all those 50 surveys, more than 50, where are the majority of obstacles identified by companies? I'll let you think. Where do exporters find most non-tariff barriers?
Maybe in European Union, in developed countries.
Developed countries.
Yeah, developed.
Okay. Okay, Malik. Anybody else? Anybody else want to hazard a guess? Unfortunately, Malik, you're not right. The majority of the obstacles are found in your own country. The majority of obstacles to trade are domestic, and this is across the world. This is developed and developing countries. So companies complain the most about their own authorities making it difficult for them to export and import because it's requirements around entering ports or requirements around when and how to pay for tariffs or how to obtain permits or how to get, I don't know, authorizations for exporting or for importing or time scheduling for inspections at ports. And these things, companies report that these things, domestic obstacles, are the biggest problem. And this is consistent across all countries.
Interesting, very interesting.
I know it's incredibly interesting. That's one of the things that, I mean, I was working with ITC intensely at this point. And when these results started coming in, we would say, wow. Okay, so you might expect that this could be the case, I don't know, in Africa or in Latin America, in developing countries where governments tend to be rather inept. No, 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 no. France, lots of complaints about how the government makes life difficult for companies. The US, yes, a lot. I mean, all over, companies complain about their own governments making their life difficult. That is more important in all cases than the obstacles that they face in Poland or China or wherever. That's really interesting. But all these surveys are available, they're public, so you can go and get them on ntmsurvey.infracent.org. You get that information. Now, once you've understood barriers and standards and all these things and requirements, the next thing that needs to be understood so that exporters can make decisions on how to enter the market is price information. Of course, you cannot tell them what price they need to establish because it's their problem. Ultimately, it's their company doing the business. So it's their risk. But you can inform them of what are the variables around pricing that will affect them and how they will affect them. So, of course, the availability of pricing information and the reliability of that information depends on the product and the countries. Commodities and agricultural products, agricultural food products, they have more information available because mangoes are mangoes. I mean, I discussed mangoes yesterday, but mangoes, I mean, if you have the biological, the botanical description of mangoes, that is the same mango whether it comes from India, Colombia, Brazil, or Indonesia. And it's the same mango. I mean, so it's easier to track, it's easier to establish prices. And almost every single country in the world has a keen interest on following up with the domestic markets, with the large wholesaler markets, to inform its own citizens of what is happening with prices. So this price information around food and agricultural products and even commodities, your electricity, your oil, your gas, all these things, that's fairly commonplace. That you can get fairly easily, almost all across the world. But manufactured goods, industrial products, that gets a lot trickier. Just consider, for example, computers. How do you know the price of a computer nowadays? Well, you can't know the price of a computer because you have to consider what type of processor it has, how much memory it has, what type of screen it has, what type of size, whether it's a laptop or a desktop. And there's a whole number of variables that determine the price of the product. In other words, there's a lot more specifications of products. Think of mobile phones. There's hundreds of models, all of them at different price points. So it's very, very difficult to get precise price information for industrial products because they're more differentiated. They're more They're more targeted at narrow niches or narrow segments of consumers. So what this means is if you're discussing industrial products, you're going to struggle to find prices, and therefore it will be more interesting to provide 2 or 3 reference points and like information on how the cost is transformed into price than if you're discussing, I don't know, oranges. Because if you're looking for international prices on oranges, it's a lot easier to find. When it comes to oranges and many of these agricultural products, ITC has put in place this MPI tool, which is Market Price Information Tool. It is really useful because what it does is it accesses different sources of information from different parts of the world for specific products, typically agricultural and commodities, even purely agricultural most of the time. As you can see, the real-time price data is available for agricultural, culinary spices, dairy and livestock, fish, fresh fruits, grains, and oil, nuts, and fats. So the things that are more commonplace or easier to get information for. Okay? These are, again, references because varieties, ripeness, lots of different things will determine the price for a specific product, whether it's organic or not, whether it's certified organic or only recommended organic or just claims to be organic. All these things will change the price, but these are references. So all of these elements you will find information for in the types of reports I've mentioned. Of course, you will find them also around the internet. So one of the things I like to do when I am doing market research for a specific product in a specific country is go and look at supermarket websites and see how much they are charging and what they're advertising, how much they're advertising, what is their behavior. And that already starts to tell me lots of things about how the product is consumed in that target market. What are the prices and what are likely to be the volumes and all these things. So at this point, what I would like you to do is I would like you to go back to your breakout rooms. I'm opening all rooms now, because now you can continue answering several of the questions of the exercise.
Yeah, what we should do, sorry.
What I would like you to do, Malik, is now that you understand about sources of information for specific markets and how to understand the market, I want you to start working again. You are working on apricots, right?
Apricots.
So
Yeah.
I want you to, now that you have selected a single market, I don't know which, but it sounds as if you have selected what, Russia, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want you to explore the Russian market. I want you to understand the Russian market. I want you to be able to answer all of the key questions around the Russian market for apricots. How you're going to recommend to your companies to export their apricots to Russia and make a killing, and make a lot of money in the process.
Understand. Okay, I took the sources which you provide. I will try. Mm-hmm.
Those and anything else you can find. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Exactly.
thanks.
Thank you.